The Zodiac Man and the Bible. There are 12 zodiac signs. Each represent an age of 2,000 years, making one full circle 24,000 years. One day to the Lord is said to be 1,000 years. This is because very much like a day that has 24 hours with 12 hours for day and 12 hours for night, if you take 1/2 of an astrological age of 2,000 years, you get 1,000. Prophecy comes from the stars. God said he would put his signs in the stars, and the ancient Egyptians knew this. Pharaohs go back thousands of years. We know this because the astrological age they were in was represented by the crowns of the pharaohs. To be Pharaoh was to be the son of God. The Pharaoh embodied this, and thus the zodiac man was created. The Pharaoh's body literally represented the cosmos, with each body part represented by a zodiac sign. And it is here that biblical history and prophecy begin. So starting from the beginning, one of the first signs that we'll look at is Leo. On the zodiac man, it's the body part that represents the heart. Leo is actually the beginning of time for humanity. The crown that represents that for the pharaohs is the red crown, with the spiral at the top that represents the lion's tail. The reason why I put Leo as the beginning astrological age, and particularly in reference to the Bible, is because in Genesis, God took woman out of man, and the part that he took woman out of was, some translations say, his side or his rib, and we know the heart is right behind the rib cage. This could very well possibly be the mystery of the Sphinx. Seems how she marks the very beginning of creation for mankind. The next one's going to be Cancer. The next 2,000 years is the astrological age of Cancer. This is represented by the water crown, or the limestone crown, as I like to call it, because it's white. This could have possibly been when Noah's flood took place, or when the angels came down and wreaked a lot of havoc on the earth. Could be around that time. So whenever you see a pharaoh with this particular crown, you know that that's the astrological time period for that is going to be Cancer. And then next 2,000 years is going to be Gemini. This is represented by the pharaohs in terms of the king and the queen both wear an identical crown. This is to represent male and female equality as represented by the twins. On the zodiac man, it's represented by the arms. And as you can see here, this king is holding a child. She's holding a child. Usually it's just the women with the children, but because there's that equality, they're both holding children. And so this is actually 6,000 years in after the age of Leo. So this is Gemini. Could possibly also be during the biblical time when the women were having twins. The next astrological age is going to be Taurus. That's represented by the bull, and on the zodiac man, that's going to be the area of his neck. I have the pyramids up here because the time period I'm guessing that they were built in is going to be the age of Taurus, because on the inside of these pyramids is the 2 shafts and chambers, and a lot of people don't know what it's for or what it represents. It's actually an altar to the Lord. I have the scriptures up on the first slide. In another video, I'll go over that theory. But as far as the chambers go, they actually represent the constellation of Taurus. It's actually very identical. And so the pyramids on the inside, those chambers, actually represent the constellation of Taurus as it tracks through the night sky. So this is what all 6 of the pharaoh's crown looks like up to the last one. Like I said, the red one is the first one. It's the fire crown, fire being the granite stone. So in the age of Leo, then you have the water crown represented by the age of Cancer. And then those two together actually represent the Taurus crown, which is the water and fire crown put together. A lot of people think it represents Upper and Lower Egypt. It does not. The blue crown that they say is supposed to be a war crown actually isn't. It's the age of Gemini's crown because the queen has an identical crown to match the pharaoh. The next crown you see is for the age of Aries. And this headdress is actually represented by ram horns. That's what the crown means, actually. Those are supposed to represent the horns of a ram. And so that's the next 2,000 years. So far we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12,000 years, give or take, of pharaoh lineage that goes all the way back. And this last one, that represents, it looks kind of like the Cancer crown, so you know it means water. And then it has 2 fins on each side. That's the Pisces crown. That is going to be the crown for the fish. A lot of people claim that Osiris wears it. The Egyptians were not god and goddess worshippers. They were trying to explain very complex astrological knowledge as it pertains to them, right? But that this was their way of simplifying it. So the crown for Pisces is this one right here. It has 2 fish fins. And then the next one after that is going to be Isis. She represents Aquarius, and so on and so forth. Now, why is this important, and how does this pertain to biblical prophecy? Well, this gives you time periods. What you have to understand is that to be pharaoh was very, very important. Like I said, to be pharaoh was to be deemed the son of God. This was during the time when the whole world was actually called Asia, and the indigenous people on the earth were called the Afro-Asiatic family. And this consisted of Egyptians, Israelites, Ethiopians, Barbers, Arabs, all different types. Okay. And so I'm going to go to one biblical prophecy in particular to break down what it means and why it was important. So we're going to go to the book of Daniel. And in the book of Daniel, no one really explains this to Christians because they don't really understand it. So in Daniel's dream in chapter 8, he has a dream about this ram who is at the height of its power. And what that is that we're going to go back to Aries, that crown of the pharaohs. This means that they are at the height of their power. That's the astrological time period that Daniel is looking at and that he's in right now. They're in the Babylonian captivity. This isn't their first time being enslaved, but Daniel gets a vision of this goat that comes across the earth without touching it, and breaks the power of the ram. And this is troublesome because the next astrological signs after Aries is Pisces, which is represented by the 2 fish and that crown of Osiris that I just talked about. And then the next 2,000 years is Aquarius, and that's the water-bearing sign. and that's represented by Isis. And then the next one is Capricorn. Now, the reason why this is so troubling to Daniel is that this goat that he saw that made it across to the ram without touching the ground is the sign for Capricorn. And it gives descriptions on what this goat looks like. And so I have a picture here of exactly why. This is actually what some people would consider a statue of Satan or Lucifer. It is a goat with two horns and one that goes up in the middle, just like how it talks about in the book of Daniel. So this is what you see. This is Capricorn. It's given as the image of Satan, and this is important because this is exactly what happens. The goat is represented by Greece, and so during that time period, you would come to Alexander the Great. Why is this important? Well, in history, it talks about how he pretty much took over all of Asia. And we don't catch it at first, but because when we're looking at it in school, we're thinking Asia is just this small country and he took over this small region. No, at the time that they're saying that he took over Asia was when the whole world was literally called Asia. And so he literally took over the whole world. That's the part that doesn't get broken down. It's there, but it doesn't get broken down very easily. And then he also claims the title of Pharaoh, which is meaning son of God. And this is when you start to see some of the last crowns for the pharaohs, right? As you see these Greek pharaohs. And so Alexander the Great comes in and he steals the birthright to be son of God. And this happens about 400 to 300 years before Christ comes on the scene. And this influences the split of Israel also, is that some end up paying allegiance to Rome. And so this is why it's problematic, because Alexander the Great comes in, he takes the title of Pharaoh, he takes the title of Lord of the Earth. And so you see God's people under Roman oppression. And so when Christ comes on the scene, and of course you see them taking a census when he's born to try to execute any firstborn males who may carry the actual Messiah lineage. But Christ escapes, as we know in his story, to Egypt, and then he's fine. But this is why it's problematic for when he grows up and he's actually the son of God. And for the sign Pisces, it's represented on the zodiac man as the feet. And so that's why you see Christ being represented as feet of bronze, and the woman, cleaning his feet with her hair, and he washes his disciples' feet. We see him walk on water. We see him recruit fishermen. Why? Because the Bible, while those things are very significant, the Bible is trying to point to the time period and why he is the true Messiah. This is why he is the true Son of God. And this is what also gets him killed. Because when he comes forward with this to cover up their sin and their error, they have him crucified, which is why you see, instead of God's people going to God about the situation of Christ, they go to the Romans. He's blaspheming, blah, blah, blah. He's claiming to be the Son of God, which he was. And then they have him crucified. And so you see Roman oppression continue up until this very day because of what they did to Christ. And so this is why that was so significant. And those biblical prophecies are covered in the book of Revelation. This is also why the writer of Revelations, John, is asked to write 7 letters to the 7 churches in Asia. And so what a lot of people get misunderstood is that they think he's writing 7 letters to this very small area. No, he actually wrote 7 letters to the 7 churches, or to the 7 areas of God's people on the 7 continents. And so if you take a look at the old points where they say the churches are, you get something that looks like the constellation of the Pleiades. So remember, Christ talks about, I hold the 7 stars in my right hand. And you'll notice that the churches are lined up perfectly, almost like a mirror image to the constellation Pleiades. And then when you take another look at the churches, and you realize that fact that I just described about the whole world being Asia, you realize that the points of all these different churches actually line up to the 7 continents on the earth, making Patmos be closer to Hawaii. And so you have this here. You have Ephesus in South America, Smyrna in North America. The 3rd church is in Canada. The 4th is in Europe. The 5th one is in the Middle East, and the 6th one, Philadelphia, is in Africa. And then you have the lukewarm church in Australia. And this is like a huge key factor and find. It's one of the best archaeological finds this is literally the key that helps you understand the different prophecies in the book of Revelation. So you just follow this map. For each of the letters, it talks about God's people being oppressed. And for each one of them is given a different reward. I'll go over that in a later video because it's very important. So like, for instance, Ephesus gets the fruit from the tree of life. And this is significant because literally South America grows majority of our food. That's where a lot of people are. Smyrna talks about how they have a very poor quality of life. And so their reward, if they can just hang in there, will be the crown of life, and so on and so forth. The Church of Philadelphia talks about brotherly love, and we know that's the Muslims. And then the Middle East, there's different things, and I'll go into a different video to break down each of those prophecies. But every single time, and you can go back and research this for yourself. I'm big on being studious. So when you get a chance, go back to the book of Revelations and you'll realize, so each of the 7 letters goes to these 7 areas, right? And then as the prophecies unfold, you get the first seal, you'll know to look in the area of South America. The second seal, you'll know to look in North America. Like, these are prophecies at locations. And so Revelations 1 through 13 covers 2,000 years worth of prophecy for the age of Pisces. And then the next one that you'll see, I believe it's in Revelations 14 through maybe 17. I got to go back and look. But the bowls of punishment, that's Aquarius. Remember, she's the water bearer. And so when they're pouring their bowls on the earth, that's a clue for Aquarius. And then the order that it goes in is exactly how the churches are placed on the map. So you'll know that each of those different prophecies are going to hit each of these different locations. So Revelations really isn't about the world ending. It is about a way of life ending. A Babylonian way of life, and then God's people being restored tenfold. And this goes on quite a bit. I think the next one, so the 7 bowls of punishment, that is Aquarius. That's going to take place for the next 2,000 years, and that's Revelation 14 to 16. The next astrological sign is going to be Capricorn, finally. And in the book of Revelations, that is Revelation 17 through 18. And it talks about the whore of Babylon and how Babylon falls. And on the zodiac man, the sign given for Capricorn is the knees. And so it's ironic that, when you fall on your knees. And of course, most people, this goes without saying, where do you find a whore? You find her on her knees. Aquarius, one thing I forgot to mention about that sign, it's represented by Isis, by the Egyptians. And the zodiac sign for that is legs. Okay, which is why it was also very important that at Christ's crucifixion, they didn't break his legs. They put that in scripture. That's another clue. There's all these different clues in scriptures that lead you to the next astrological age. And so you have to use the zodiac wheel, the zodiac man, and of course, the biblical map that I just showed you about the different churches and the different points that shows you where all the different biblical prophecies are going to take place, or just give you a kind of idea of like where to look. The next astrological age after Capricorn is going to be Sagittarius, and that's represented by Revelations 19. It shows Christ coming back, and he's on a white horse. He has a name written on his thigh. This is also represented on the zodiac man, meaning that the sign for the zodiac of Sagittarius on the zodiac man is represented by the thigh. That's the body part that's on the thigh. So that's the clue. And that's 2,000 years. The next one is Scorpio. This is represented by the loins on the zodiac man. And it talks about how Satan is bound for 1,000 years. And that Christ and his followers reign for 1,000. So those are 2,000 years in plain sight right there. It says for 1,000 years, Satan is bound. And then for 1,000 years after that, Christ and his followers rule. And then you get to Revelation 20, verse 11 through 15. And that's the astrological age of Libra. As we all know, Libra is the balancing of the scales. And that's 2,000 years of judgment. And you see in the book of Revelations, the books are open. And then the next 2,000 years is Virgo. On the zodiac man, it's represented as the belly. In Revelations 21, this is when the bride of Christ is described as like this beautiful and coming down from heaven. That's in the age of Virgo. Because we all know the Virgo represents a virgin. Virgins are typically dressed in white like a bride to be married. So that's the clue for that. And then in Revelations 22 is the astrological age of Leo all over again. And so you get the Alpha and the Omega. You get the complete time wheel. We are highly misled to think that the world is just going to end. God's going to call it quits. And then it's all going to be over, when really over the course of the next 10,000 years, it would appear he slowly but surely continues to restore humanity, restore his people, and break the rule of Babylon. And so in the time period we're living now, there's another biblical prophecy that Daniel sees. We all, if you can go back in your Bibles and go back to the statue that had gold, silver, bronze, and then at the feet, it had iron and clay mixed into the feet. And God takes, this huge stone and he destroys it. The kingdom finally gets destroyed, but not by human might. And the kingdom that gets destroyed is mixed with clay, so that means the original man, and iron, which means the Babylonian people. And we're kind of living in that age right now where you'll see a lot of people, particularly Babylonian or Catholic, who believe, the world's going to come to an end and society's going to come to a halt and all these different things. Yes, the Babylonian way of life is going to cease, and they have no clue how, which is why they're always prophesying maybe an asteroid will hit the earth and destroy their kingdom. Maybe a big plague will break out and, they'll get sick and they'll die. They have no clue how God's going to take down their kingdom, except that only he's going to remove it nonetheless. So in my next video, I will be going over all of the different prophecies in the age of Pisces and some of the teachings of Christ and how they match up with what I just finished talking about, as well as some of the difficulties that the new believers face, as well as what we're seeing and what we're facing today. I encourage everyone to go back. If you believe what I'm saying, great. If you don't, great. It's all just to get you to think and to learn. Really go back and study this out for yourself to see if what I'm saying is to be true. Because otherwise I completely understand that everything I just covered is highly controversial. Stay tuned for the next video. Like and subscribe. Thanks.